What are you doing here? Charlotte's voice rang out before the front door had even closed behind me. I turned slowly. She stood in the hallway in her heels and designer coat, not a hair out of place, like she'd walked out of a magazine spread about grief. She still smelled faintly like the perfume she'd worn to the wake, something expensive and distant. She didn't wait for me to answer. You don't belong here. 5 words. Smooth as glass. Sharper than they sounded. They hit me harder than I expected even now. I let my fingers tighten around the strap of my worn leather bag. The same one I'd carried to doctor's appointments, pharmacies, late-night emergency calls. We were in Dad's house. The house I hadn't left in months except to sleep in the chair beside his bed at hospice. The house I kept warm while Charlotte went live from art galleries and beach resorts. I looked at her. Really looked. Her eyes were dry. Her makeup perfect. Grief hadn't touched her. Not visibly. I live here, I said quietly. I've been here. She let out a cold little laugh, stepping deeper into the foyer. You did your part, Liv, she said, voice clipped like she was reciting a fact. Dad's gone. That chapter's closed. You need to leave. My stomach turned, but I didn't flinch. She always thought she could rewrite the past if she said it with enough confidence. I changed Dad's dressings, I said, not loudly but firmly. I cleaned the blood off the sheets when hospice sent him home to die. I fed him when he couldn't lift a fork. Where were you then? Charlotte blinked like I'd slapped her. But she didn't answer because she didn't have to. She was the golden one. Always had been. The one who made something of herself. The one who'd walk into the lawyer's office tomorrow with a smirk, fully expecting to inherit everything, because of course she would. But something had changed. Dad knew. In the end he saw her clearly. But before we go any further, I'd love to know, where in the world are you watching from? Drop your location in the comments below. I love seeing how far this little story can travel. Let's make this space feel a little more connected, no matter how many miles are between us. My sister was already seated, legs crossed, fingers drumming against the edge of Dad's desk like she was bored waiting for a latte, not about to hear his final wishes. Her nails clicked with a steady rhythm, each tap more condescending than the last. Oh, she said without looking up. You actually showed. Casual. Offhand, with a smile sweet enough to pass for concern. She looked perfectly curated as usual. Black designer dress, heels too high for comfort. Not a strand of hair out of place. She wasn't mourning. She was performing. Her perfume hovered in the air, sharp and floral, like her tone. Wasn't sure they'd even let you in, she added, flipping through a magazine with those perfect, polished nails. I mean, you were barely around. My hands curled in my lap. It was a lie. One she'd tell because no one would challenge her. She had no idea how many nights I spent driving Dad to appointments, reading medical paperwork, handling the medications when his hands shook too badly to open the bottles. But because I hadn't spent much time here in this office, she could paint her version of the truth and people would believe it. My chest tightened. Every breath felt like I was inhaling dust. She finally looked up, tilting her head just slightly, as if seeing me under bad lighting. You look tired. Everything okay, Liv? I nodded, even though my jaw clenched. That was her game, turning daggers into velvet, acting like she cared while twisting the knife. Then she leaned back in Dad's leather chair like she owned the whole room, crossed her arms and said with a sip of water, Dad always had a soft spot for strays. I guess that's why he kept you around. I froze. Not daughter. Not even sister. Just a stray. Something he fed out of guilt or loneliness. My throat burned. She wasn't done. Do you remember, she asked, tilting her head like she was genuinely curious, when you flunked out of college and he still bought you that used Honda? Said you needed a fresh start. She laughed. I didn't. What I did remember was how ashamed I felt, how I worked double shifts and studied at night just to stay afloat. How I fell behind not because I wasn't trying but because I was trying too hard. Trying to pay for tuition out of pocket. Trying to do it on my own because there was no help. Not for me. Back then our parents had said money was tight. We wish we could help, honey. They'd say, voices heavy with guilt. But somehow there were always funds for Charlotte's trips. For the new camera, the branded clothes, the hotel suites she needed for her photo shoots. She was their investment. I was their afterthought. And now here she was, sitting in Dad's chair calling me a stray. She made it sound like I chose to struggle, like I failed for the thrill of it. My throat burned, but I kept my voice even. You have no idea what I gave up, I said quietly. She rolled her eyes like I was boring her. Oh, please, Liv. Don't start with the martyr routine. It's tired. You are good at fresh starts, Liv. Just not much on follow-through. That was Charlotte, never missing a chance to remind me I didn't measure up. How's the nonprofit? Still collecting broken things. Her voice oozed condescension. She didn't care about my work. She never asked about it. She just wanted to remind me I didn't earn six figures, that my job didn't come with designer shoes or VIP invites. She laughed again, then I leaned in. I raised an eyebrow. So, still managing luxury properties with Chad, the investment guy? Still married? Her expression tightened just slightly. Oh, Liv, keep up. Chad and I split 6 months ago. But I'm sure you were too busy rescuing raccoons or saving stray dogs or whatever your latest cause is. Stung. She knew I worked with families with shelters with causes I cared about. She mocked it on purpose. She always did that, belittled what mattered to me so she could feel taller. The door opened. The lawyer walked in, breaking the tension, but not easing it. An older man, quiet steps. Stack of documents under one arm. Charlotte's demeanor changed in an instant. Her back straightened. Her expression softened into something polite. She crossed her legs the other way and smiled. Let's begin, he said. He read through the opening statements. Legal jargon, formalities. Charlotte scribbled something on her notepad, probably calculating the value of the Bellevue property. Her eyes flicked over the papers like she already knew the outcome. To my daughter Charlotte, I leave the antique piano and the vintage watch collection. Her smile widened. And to my daughter Olivia, I leave all financial and real estate assets, including the Bellevue property, liquid funds, and full rights to the estate. I saw it before she reacted. Her face didn't fall immediately. It twitched. Then the pen froze. Her hand clenched. Her eyes snapped to the lawyer. I'm sorry, what? All financial and real estate assets, he repeated, including the Bellevue property. Charlotte stood so fast her chair tipped over, hitting the floor. This is a mistake. He wouldn't do that. That house. He promised it to me. The lawyer placed a sign page in front of her. Finalized 6 months ago. She looked at me. Her eyes burned. You manipulated him. While I was taking care of my life, you were whispering things in his ear. I sat still. He was dying. You were in Bali. She scoffed. Because I thought he was being looked after. I trusted you. He asked me to stay, I said. That silenced her for a beat. Because she didn't expect that. Because she didn't believe he'd ever choose me. You think you're better than me now? No, I said, standing slowly. Just not beneath you anymore. I adjusted the pendant he gave me years ago. My fingers brushed the worn edges. It felt warm against my chest. And then I turned, walked to the door, and left. I didn't need to hear more. I didn't need her words anymore. I stood taller. The day after the will was read, I woke up before the sun. Not because I had to, but because my body couldn't forget how to be on alert. My chest still felt tight. My fingers still tingled like I was about to fight. I sat up in bed and stared at the ceiling, willing the room to feel safe. It didn't. I couldn't stop hearing her voice. You don't belong here. Over and over. Her words had followed me home like dust, settling in every corner. It didn't matter that I had the deed to the house now, the bank accounts, the assets. Charlotte had carved her message into my skin long before any paperwork was signed. She thought I was a mistake. Always had. When we were kids, Charlotte used to tell people I was adopted, just to see if they'd believe her. After Mom died, she told the neighbors I wasn't really her sister. That's why I didn't care. I still remember the way they looked at me after that. Tight-lipped sympathy, sideways glances, whispers that never quite faded. A few of them still believe her. When I brought it up once, Dad just sighed and said, "It's not a big deal, sweetheart. We know the truth. You're older, she's acting out." But it was a big deal. It always was. At every stage, every chapter, she kept finding new ways to make me feel like an extra. A supporting character in my own life. I made coffee that morning just to feel like I was doing something normal. The silence in the kitchen felt heavier now, not peaceful, more like a pause before something worse. I sat at the table holding the warm mug with both hands, staring at the screen of my phone. Nothing from Charlotte. No apology. No explanation. Just silence. That was her way. She would wait until she could reframe the story and make herself the victim. I thought about the way she said stray in front of the lawyer. Not by accident. She chose that word because it reduced me. She wanted to make sure that even in a room full of legal witnesses, I'd still feel small. I remembered the way she laughed when she brought up my old Honda, like it was proof I didn't belong in our family. That car got me through years of working 2 jobs while she flew business class to retreats in places I couldn't pronounce. She always measured worth by money, status, brand names, and I let her. For so long, I let her define me by what I didn't have. Because deep down I thought maybe she was right. But not anymore. That morning I walked through the halls of the house I now owned. Every step was quieter than I expected. I paused at the entryway where she used to hold court at every family gathering. Her voice always louder. Her opinions always final. Dad rarely corrected her. He was tired by then or maybe just resigned. But I remembered the last real conversation I had with him. He was frail, sunken into the couch like he was made of paper. He took my hand and said, "You've always shown up, even when it was hard." That stayed with me. So did Charlotte's voice, even more than his. That morning before the will was read when she said, "You actually showed." Like she expected me to disappear. Like she wanted me to. The resentment ran deeper than I admitted. It wasn't just her words. It was every eye roll when I spoke. Every fake compliment she gave just to mock me later. Every gift she pretended to love and then returned. Every time she interrupted me at the dinner table just to change the subject. Every moment she sucked the oxygen out of the room to keep all attention on her. She once told a family friend at a holiday party that I was the charity project of the family. Loud enough for me to hear. I laughed it off at the time. I always laughed it off because the alternative was confronting her. And I was tired of losing those battles before they even began. I sat down on the couch and finally opened the folder the lawyer had handed me. Pages and pages of signatures, instructions, account transfers. Dad had been thorough. I wondered how much of it he planned with me in mind. Or maybe it was just the first time he saw her clearly too. There was a note tucked between 2 legal pages. His handwriting. I recognized it instantly. "Liv, I hope you'll use this to build something that makes you proud. Not to prove anything, just to be free." Dad. Tears burned in my eyes, but they didn't fall. I wasn't crying for him. I had done all my grieving in silence alone, while Charlotte was too busy to pick up the phone. No, the tears were for me. For all the birthdays she skipped. For all the kindness I gave her that she never returned. For every single time I told myself to be the bigger person. I didn't want to be the bigger person anymore. I wanted to be done. My phone buzzed. Charlotte. I stared at her name for a long moment before answering. I didn't know why I picked up. Habit maybe, or curiosity. I braced myself. "So," she said, her voice tight and falsely light. "How does it feel to finally win?" "It's not a game," I replied. "Oh, come on. Everything with you is a performance. The quiet, humble act. The poor little martyr. Dad ate it up. I took care of him. And got paid for it," she snapped. "Don't act like you didn't know what you were doing." I felt my jaw tighten. "I didn't ask for this," I said. "But you sure didn't turn it down." She let out a bitter laugh. "You think just because some lawyer read your name off a page, it means you're better than me?" I didn't answer. "This changes nothing," she continued. "You'll still be the same girl who cried in gym class and couldn't make it through freshman year. Money doesn't fix pathetic." There it was. The full venom. The real Charlotte. I waited for the anger, but it didn't come. Just a strange, sharp calm. "You called me pathetic while I changed his oxygen tank," I said. "You went shopping while I cleaned his wounds. You posted beach photos while I held his hand." Silence. "I'm not better than you, Charlotte. But I was there. That's why I got the house." She hung up. I didn't feel satisfied, but I didn't feel small either. Later that evening, I sat on the porch with a blanket over my knees. The sunset spilled across the front yard, lighting up the trees in soft orange and gold. It was the first time in weeks the house felt like it was breathing again. Inside, Charlotte's echo still lingered, but it was growing fainter. I was growing stronger. The next morning I started going through every drawer, every cabinet. Charlotte had left behind traces of herself in this house. I opened the linen closet and found an old photo album. It was hers. Every photo carefully staged. Family gatherings where she was always front and center, always flawless. In some of them I was cropped out. Literally. The final photo in the album was from Dad's birthday 5 years ago. She was smiling wide, her arm around his shoulder. I stood behind the cake, half blocked by a chair. I remembered that day. She arrived late, complained about the food, then left early. But the photo told a different story. That was how she worked, control the image, rewrite the reality. Not anymore. I closed the album. I moved room by room, collecting traces of Charlotte's presence. Designer robes left in guest rooms. Jewelry stashed in the back of Dad's armoire. Receipts for spa visits and catering services I never saw. Each item went into a box labeled Charlotte. Then I made a list. Things I needed to fix. Things I needed to keep. And names I needed to call. Tomorrow I'd change the locks. And change the gate code, and after that, I'd start thinking about what to do next. Not to make a point, but to finally quietly begin again. And this time without her shadow. I didn't sleep the night after our last call. Even with the windows closed and the curtains drawn, I could feel Charlotte's voice echoing in my head. Every word she spoke felt like it had been injected with years of resentment. And somehow it still surprised me. The next morning, I sat on the back steps of the house, my house now, and stared out at the overgrown garden. Dad used to keep it so neat. He would trim the hedges on Sunday mornings and Mom would talk to the roses like they were people. I remembered watching them from the kitchen window as a teenager, always wondering what she saw in those flowers. Now I knew. They bloomed for those who stayed. That day, I decided to start sorting through Dad's office. It had always been off-limits. I opened the door slowly. The air inside smelled like cedar and old paper. His desk was still covered in neatly stacked folders, pens arranged perfectly in a wooden tray. I slid open the top drawer and began going through it one envelope at a time. At first it was just paperwork, insurance, bank records, utilities. But then I found something else. A letter. Addressed to me in his handwriting. Liv, if you're reading this, then the will has already been read. I want you to know I saw everything. I may not have said it enough, but I noticed how often you showed up, how often you stayed when others left, especially when it was hardest. Charlotte. She's never been one for softness. I hoped she'd grow out of it. I was wrong. You always had a stronger heart than she did. Please protect what I've left you. Don't feel guilty for it. You earned it 100 times over. Love, Dad. I held the letter in my hands for a long time. My chest ached, but not from grief. From the weight of being seen finally. I wasn't the extra. I wasn't the afterthought. Later that afternoon, I went to the local bank to finalize the transfer of the estate accounts. That's when things shifted. The banker, a soft-spoken man named Greg, gave me a strange smile as he pulled up the records. Looks like some activity happened recently, he said, tilting the screen so I could see. What kind of activity? I asked. He scrolled. There were several large withdrawals a few weeks ago transferred to a separate account under joint authorization. My stomach tightened. Joint authorization with who? He clicked. Charlotte. I stared at the screen. Dozens of transactions carefully spread out to look like normal spending. Renovations. Travel. Legal fees. But they weren't small and they weren't for Dad. Was she listed as a financial manager? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Yes, Greg said. Through a power of attorney filed April 15th. I felt cold. April 15th. I remembered that visit. She flew in like a savior, said she wanted to help lighten my load. She brought coffee and legal documents, smiling like she was finally stepping up. She'd said, "Let me handle some of this. It's too much for you." And I'd believed her. But that was the week Dad had major surgery. He was heavily medicated, barely conscious most days. There was no way he could have knowingly signed anything. Now I realized she hadn't come to help. She'd come to set the stage. I took copies of everything and left without saying much. Back in my car, I sat for almost 20 minutes before I could bring myself to turn the key. My fingers gripped the steering wheel like I was holding onto something that might float away. Charlotte hadn't just insulted me. She'd been quietly draining the accounts while pretending to care. While I was tending to Dad's wounds, she was preparing to cash out. I went home and laid every document out on the dining table, forming a timeline out of paperwork and betrayal. I cross-checked signatures line by line. My eyes landed on the power of attorney. It wasn't Dad's handwriting. His signature had always been tight, deliberate, professional, even when his hands started to tremble. This one was loose, almost casual. The curves looked familiar. Too familiar. It looked like Charlotte's handwriting. My stomach dropped. I flipped to the notary stamp. The name was her best friend's husband. It wasn't just manipulation. It was theft. And then something hit me. A memory I had buried so deep, I hadn't even realized it was still there. It was the day my father kicked me out. I had just turned 21. I'd come home for the summer after a brutal semester, exhausted, burned out, and clinging to whatever was left of my confidence. I told them I needed a few months to regroup, maybe take some community classes, work nearby. Charlotte didn't even wait for me to finish. She rolled her eyes and said, "You're not a student, Liv. You're just a dropout in denial." Then she added with a smirk, "Honestly, it's embarrassing." Dad didn't defend me. He sat at the kitchen table, quiet for a moment, then said, "Maybe you should go figure this out somewhere else." Those words crushed me. I packed my things in silence. No argument. No scene. Just quiet shame. Charlotte stood in the hallway, arms folded, watching me struggle with my bags, smiling like she'd won. Now, over a decade later, I realized she had already been whispering into his ear back then, framing me as weak, as a burden. She didn't just wait until he was dying to manipulate things. She had always been playing the long game. It wasn't just unfair. It was calculated. And I had walked into every trap thinking I was the problem. What stung more was the realization that every sacrifice I had made, every plan I had canceled, every bill I paid quietly without asking for help, it hadn't bought me respect. Not from Charlotte. Not even, for a long time, from Dad. I recalled Christmas 8 years ago. Charlotte had promised to fly in and help me organize the holiday dinner. I'd done everything, cooked, decorated, even paid for her flight. She canceled last minute, citing a personal emergency, then posted vacation photos from Aspen the next day. When I mentioned it to Dad, he said, "She's busy. Don't make a big deal out of it." That memory lit something inside me. I called Martha. She was Dad's old friend. The kind of person who remembered birthdays without social media. The kind who still mailed handwritten cards and brought over soup without asking first. When she answered, I didn't cry. I told the truth. "Charlotte took money," I said. "A lot of it. While I was busy caring for him." The power of attorney she filed. Dad couldn't have signed it. I looked at the date. April 15th. That was the day he was on the operating table. He was under anesthesia for 8 hours and barely conscious for days after. He couldn't lift a spoon, let alone hold a pen. And the signature. My voice tightened. It doesn't even look like his. It's loose. Sloppy. It looks more like hers. There was a pause on Martha's end. Not disbelief, just something heavier. "And the notary listed?" I went on. "It's her best friend's husband. This wasn't a mistake. This was staged." While I was changing bedpans and coordinating hospice visits, she was filing paperwork behind my back. "You were never the weak one, Liv," Martha said softly. "You were just the quiet one. And she used that." "I want to do something," I said. My voice cracked, not from fear but from finally meaning it. "Then do it," she replied. "Don't wait for her to play the next move. You already have all the pieces." That night, I sat at the dining table where I used to sort Dad's medications. I opened my laptop and wrote an email to the estate attorney. I laid it all out. The date of the signature, the power of attorney, the notary, the fact that Dad was in surgery and sedated that entire week. I attached everything. I wasn't rushing in anger. I was moving with clarity. And this time I was done being quiet. Charlotte had called me pathetic. Had said none of it mattered. But it did. Because this time she didn't just insult me. She underestimated me. She assumed I'd stay silent. But silence can build power too. And mine was long overdue. It started with a phone call I didn't return. Charlotte had left a voicemail. Her voice syrupy, like nothing had happened. "Hey, I think we need to talk. Maybe we got off on the wrong foot with all the legal stuff." She always said things like that. Legal stuff. As if draining our father's accounts was a clerical error. I deleted the message without listening to the end. The silence between us became my shield. It was my first real act of resistance. Not explaining myself. The law firm Dad used to handle his affairs was still tied to the estate. I scheduled a quiet meeting with one of their younger partners. Her name was Grace. Maybe 10 years older than me, but she carried herself like she'd weathered every storm twice. She listened as I laid everything out, the withdrawals, the timing, the forgeries. She didn't gasp or flinch. "You have a case," she said, calm and steady. "I can help you freeze any accounts still in dispute." She slid a paper across the table. "This is your formal request to audit every transaction during the 6 months prior to your father's passing." I signed it without hesitation. Back home I called a locksmith, changed every lock. Then I filed a change of address on her behalf, and had all estate-related mail rerouted to my P.O. box. It was all legal. All clean. When the panic started to show in her emails, I remained silent. "Liv, this is getting out of hand. We're sisters. You know this isn't what Dad would have wanted. We need to fix this before it's too late." She had never said we until there was something she feared losing. In her world, control was comfort, and I had removed it. Then came the anger. One morning I woke up to a string of messages, each colder than the last. "You're making a huge mistake. You're breaking the family apart. You were never cut out for this." Then the guilt campaign started. My uncle messaged me on Facebook. "You really hurt your sister. She's crying every day. Is that what you wanted?" My cousin left a voicemail. "You always were the dramatic one. Just let it go. It's just money." And then Charlotte herself. "Hope you're happy with your petty revenge. You think you're smart, but you'll never belong. You'll never be one of us. You should have just let me handle it. You've always needed someone to lead you. You've turned Dad's legacy into a battlefield. Shame on you." It came in waves: blame, guilt, manipulation. I documented everything. Grace told me, "Let them rage. You're not responsible for their reaction to boundaries they never thought you'd set." Charlotte escalated by showing up at the property. She stood outside the gate shouting my name. When I didn't come out, she left a letter in the mailbox. It wasn't an apology. It was a warning. "This isn't over. You may have the house, but you'll never be more than the girl they pitted." I saved it for Grace's file. She came back a week later, this time with 2 aunts in tow. I watched from inside as they stood at the gate arguing. Charlotte waved her arms dramatically. One of the aunts paced with her phone out, taking pictures of the property like she was documenting a crime that hadn't happened. That morning before the will was read, when she said, "You actually showed." Like she expected me to disappear. Like she wanted me to. The resentment ran deeper than I admitted. It wasn't just her words. It was every eye roll when I spoke. Every fake compliment she gave just to mock me later. Every time she interrupted me at the dinner table just to change the subject. She once told a family friend at a holiday party that I was the charity project of the family. Loud enough for me to hear. I laughed it off at the time. I always laughed it off because the alternative was confronting her. And I was tired of losing those battles before they even began. I sat down on the couch and finally opened the folder the lawyer had handed me. Pages and pages of signatures, instructions, account transfers. Dad had been thorough. I wondered how much of it he planned with me in mind. Or maybe it was just the first time he saw her clearly, too. There was a note tucked between 2 legal pages. His handwriting. I recognized it instantly. "Liv, I hope you'll use this to build something that makes you proud. Not to prove anything, just to be free. Dad." Tears burned in my eyes, but they didn't fall. My phone buzzed. "Charlotte." I stared at her name for a long moment before answering. I don't know why I picked up. Habit maybe. Or curiosity. Or maybe just to hear how she'd spin it. "So," she said, voice tight and falsely light. "How does it feel to finally win?" "It's not a game," I replied. "Oh, come on. Everything with you is a performance. The quiet, humble act. The poor little martyr. Dad ate it up. I took care of him. And got paid for it," she snapped. Don't act like you didn't know what you were doing." Then she hung up. The next morning, my phone lit up with a flood of notifications. "You need to stop this nonsense. Liv, you're being vindictive. Grow up. Open the gate. Let's talk like adults." I didn't respond. Not to the texts, not to the guilt, not to the gaslighting I knew by heart. Instead, I collected the camera footage from the security system, every timestamp visit, every signature, every moment she thought no one would see. I copied the files onto a flash drive and drove them straight to Grace, the estate attorney. When I handed it over, my fingers didn't shake. "I'm done playing quiet," I said. Then I reached into my bag and pulled out a folder. Inside were printed screenshots, every text Charlotte had sent since the will reading. The ones where she said I didn't belong, that I'd taken advantage of Dad, that I manipulated him into changing everything. "I want to sue for harassment," I added. "This isn't just a family argument anymore. She's defaming me, threatening me, and trying to intimidate me into dropping this." Grace took the folder and flipped through the pages slowly. Her expression shifted from surprise to something colder, focused. Grace looked up at me, eyes wide. "You're sure about this?" I nodded. "I'll get started on this right away," she said. "We'll review everything and let you know next steps. But, Liv, you're doing the right thing." I nodded again, quieter this time, but steady, as I finally believed it too. When the final financial report came in from Grace, the numbers were clear. $90,000 misappropriated under Charlotte's signature. Documented. Dated. Traceable. Grace sat across from me, calm but firm. "And with the forged power of attorney filed the same day your father was in surgery, heavily medicated and unconscious," she added. "The district attorney is moving forward with criminal charges." I gripped the edge of the desk. "Charges?" She nodded. "The warrant for Charlotte, and the notary who signed off, goes active Monday morning." I didn't speak at first. I just let the silence stretch, let the truth finally settle in. For once, someone else was calling it what it was. Fraud. Theft. A crime. Not a family spat. Not a misunderstanding. Not something to bury for the sake of peace. This wasn't revenge. It was justice. And it was already in motion. That night, I sat in the same spot on the back steps and watched the garden. The roses hadn't bloomed yet, but I could see the buds. Charlotte wouldn't, and I was finally okay with that. There was still a long road ahead. Repairs to the house, decisions to make about the estate, conversations with the lawyer about what came next. But something had changed inside me. I no longer needed anyone's permission to exist. And for the first time in my life, I felt what it was like to stand my ground and watch the storm pass without moving. That was power. Quiet. Steady. Mine. The news broke before I even had time to prepare. Someone tipped off the press. Local influencer facing felony charges over forged estate documents. DA confirms investigation into financial exploitation of terminal parent. Charlotte's mugshot hit the gossip blogs within hours. Her hair wasn't done. Her eyes weren't lined. It was the first time most people had seen her without a filter, and the first time I ever saw her look genuinely afraid. I didn't post anything. I didn't comment. But I read every word. The backlash was swift. Sponsors pulled out. Her brand deals disappeared overnight. Comments flooded in. People demanding answers, former fans shocked, some gloating, some heartbroken. The carefully curated version of her life was unraveling one thread at a time. My aunt called me sobbing. "This can't be true, Olivia. She wouldn't do something like that." "She did," I said, gently but firmly. "Dad's medical records prove she filed her power of attorney while he was in surgery, under anesthesia. He wasn't conscious. He couldn't have signed anything." There was silence. Then the line went dead. Other relatives texted, some cautious, some supportive, all confused. One cousin sent me a message that simply said, "I'm sorry I believed her." My uncle called demanding I stop this. When I calmly tried to explain this was out of my hands, he just hung up. Grace filed the civil case the same week the charges dropped. The evidence was solid. Clear timeline. Falsified signature. Fraudulent notarization. Text. Surveillance footage. And now public disgrace. It was messy. Painful. Lonely even in victory. But for the first time in years, I wasn't shrinking myself to keep the peace. I wasn't pretending not to hurt. And when the story faded from the headlines, when the press moved on to someone else's scandal, I was still here. Not for the spotlight, but for the truth. The case moved swiftly. Given the amount of money involved and Charlotte's public profile, it became a local media storm. Headlines ran daily. Influencer caught in inheritance fraud. The kind of case a judge fast-tracks not just for justice but because the whole town was watching. The notary Lucas Denner, her best friend's husband. Mid-30s, real estate license, part-time yoga coach, and clearly in over his head. When pressed, Lucas folded fast. For a reduced sentence, he testified under oath that Charlotte had handed him the papers already signed and told him, "Dad's fine with it. He just can't come to the door right now." Under questioning, he admitted he never even saw my father that day. "Why did you do it?" the prosecutor asked. Lucas shrugged helplessly. "She said it didn't matter. That she was going to inherit everything anyway." When Charlotte entered the courtroom on the first day of trial, she looked more like she was attending a press junket than facing felony charges. A tailored ivory blazer cinched at the waist, dramatic sunglasses pushed up into perfectly styled waves, heels that clicked loud enough to echo off the paneled walls. She smiled for the cameras like she was doing a brand deal, not walking into a criminal courtroom, but the jury didn't smile back. As the trial unfolded, their expressions shifted from neutral to cold. Some disgusted. When Charlotte took the stand, she didn't come off as poised or composed. She rambled. Defensive. Contradictory. Her voice shook, not with nerves, but with outrage that anyone dared question her version of events. She manipulated him, she insisted. Liv always wanted to be the favorite. She played the caregiver card and made him feel guilty. That's why he changed the will. The courtroom was silent except for the shuffle of someone's notepad. "But if you believed your father truly wanted you to have the estate," the prosecutor asked slowly, "why forge a power of attorney while he was in surgery?" Charlotte blinked rapidly. "That wasn't the point. If I had inherited everything, none of this would matter." That sentence hung in the air like a fog. One juror actually let out a small gasp. Another shook her head. You could feel the shift in the room. Even those who didn't know the whole story could now see what we had all lived through. She believed inheritance was her birthright, and morality was optional. Charlotte stepped down from the stand looking pale. Her lawyer didn't meet her eyes. By then it wasn't about fame. It wasn't about family. It was about consequences. The sentencing was swift but unforgettable. Charlotte sat stiffly at the defense table, her jaw tight, heels tapping furiously. But when the judge read the sentence, 18 months in county custody, full restitution of the $90,000, and permanent removal from the will, something in her snapped. She stood up suddenly, eyes wild. "This is a joke," she screamed. "She manipulated him. She doesn't deserve any of it." Her voice cracked as she turned toward me, trying to lunge across the barrier. Bailiffs caught her before she got close, but she didn't stop yelling. "You think you've won? You're nothing, Liv. Nothing." I didn't move. I didn't need to. The courtroom was already convinced. Later that week, after the dust had settled, I ran into Mrs. Keller at the grocery store, an old neighbor who used to dote on Charlotte, once telling my mother that Charlotte was destined for greatness. She didn't say much now. Just pressed a letter into my hand and gave me a look that lasted a moment longer than polite. Inside was a note from the local historical society. They'd heard about the estate and wanted to know if I would consider preserving part of the property as a public garden in memory of my father. Felt right. So I said yes. I donated a portion of the backyard, the part that backed onto the road and wrapped around a small pond. We cleared the space, planted rose bushes to include Mom, and placed a quiet stone tribute beneath Dad's favorite tree. A bench, a plaque, a garden path open to the public. As Charlotte adjusted to her new reality, I was building something lasting. Not for legacy. Not for attention. For peace. And for the man who deserved to be remembered with dignity. Later that week, I hosted a quiet dedication ceremony. No fanfare, just a few cousins, some of Dad's legal partners, and members of the community who remembered him in the way he always waved from the porch. We stood beneath the oak tree as the sun dipped low, the new plaque catching the light. It wasn't grand, but it was honest. And that felt more like him than anything else ever could. A few days after the ceremony, I found an envelope on the doorstep. No return address, just my name in tight handwriting. Inside was a photo. It was of me and Dad, taken at the back steps probably 10 years ago. I had forgotten that day. We were both barefoot, drinking lemonade. He was laughing. I looked tired but real. On the back was one sentence. You became everything she feared you would. Stay strong. There was no signature. I stared at the photo for a long time. Then I placed it on the mantel. I finally understood. I didn't win. There was nothing to win. But I had reclaimed something that could never be measured in money or approval, myself. In the end, I dropped the harassment suit in exchange for a permanent restraining order. It wasn't about revenge anymore, it was about peace. Some evenings now, I sit by the garden and read. The wind moves differently. It's not heavy anymore. Feels like breath. Every now and then someone walks past and smiles. If you've ever been through something like this, or you're going through it now, drop a comment below. Share your story. You never know who might need to hear it, just to know they're not alone. Stay strong. Stay grounded. And remember, the truth always has a way of rising.